All right, thanks, Nathan. The Department of Justice is ending its investigations of civil rights violations in nearly a dozen states. Some fear Mississippi could be the next state added to the list. That's why the ACLU is now launching a new campaign. They are asking for public records requests to uncover police misconduct here in the Magnolia State. 3 News Side's Quentin Smith joins us now to explain. Quentin.
That's right, Howard. So for more than a year now, the DOJ has been investigating 2 law enforcement agencies, the Lexington Police Department and the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. Fearing the investigation into the Sheriff's Department could get dismissed, the ACLU is now creating its own plan for change. As a part of its 7-state safety campaign, the ACLU is filing public records requests in Tennessee, Massachusetts, New York, Arizona, Minnesota, Kentucky, and right here in Mississippi. In the Magnolia State, the Department of Justice spent time investigating the Lexington Police Department along with the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. The investigation centered around whether the departments engage in practices that violates a person's constitutional rights. The investigation into the Lexington Police Department was complete. However, the one into the Rankin County Sheriff's Department has been put on pause by the Trump administration. But in case it gets dismissed altogether, like other states are seeing, the ACLU has now come up with its own plan.
What the ACLU is doing, the ACLU Mississippi and ACLU National, is sending public records requests to all of the agencies where the Department of Justice investigated but did not reach a consent decree to see if we can help fill the gap that the Department of Justice has left.
Joshua Tom is the legal director at the ACLU of Mississippi. He says the organization will launch its own investigation by filing a public records request asking for things such as records and policies regarding use of force, details of when and why use of force was needed in certain cases, as well as records and policies on taser use.
We think that, after the admitted misconduct of the goon squad and other stories that we've heard from community members, that the Rankin County Sheriff may still have unconstitutional policies and practices that need to be looked at.
Although the DOJ's investigation into the Sheriff's Department is being put on pause for right now, Tom says the ACLU still wants to hold the department accountable.
We just want to make sure that you're respecting people's rights when doing that job, and that you are held accountable if you do violate people's rights.
Now, attorney Jason Dare, who represents the Sheriff's Department, sent us a statement in light of the new campaign being launched by the ACLU, saying, "I am not aware of any recent requests for public records submitted by the ACLU of Mississippi to the Rankin County Sheriff's Department." And I also want to point out that federal investigation into the Sheriff's Department came after 6 former Rankin County law enforcement officers, also known as the Goon Squad, pled guilty to beating 2 African-American men back in January of 2023. All 6 men are now serving time behind bars. Quentin Smith, 3 on your side.